Hey, this is Ash Hamilton from Horror Fix. That's horror-fix.com. I've got my co-host, John Gardner.
How y'all doing?
We're supposed to do the say hi, John. You're supposed to say hi, John.
Uh,
You've been away from the mic too long.
I have. Just sporadic here and there. I need to be regular.
John, after a huge sabbatical, you have not actually been on the show since last November.
Seriously, has it been that long?
It's been that long.
Oh, man.
You were on the show that we talked about Thanksgiving-themed horror films.
That's right.
You have not been on it since.
Ooh, time flies.
We've had so much time to talk about you behind your back that now that you're facing me, I almost don't know what to do.
Just keep talking. It's fine.
I'm a little at a loss for words. All the things that we said about your family in particular. It's very embarrassing.
All right.
So we are joined tonight by Ben Harl. Now, this is great. Now, this is sort of a perfect storm, by the way. So we had a different guest for tonight that couldn't make it. Just, called off. It happens.
These things do happen.
We're not paying anybody. Sorry, Ben. We're not paying anybody to be on the show. So, people have to do their own lives, and occasionally people have to cancel out the show. Yeah. So we sort of did this call to arms, we need somebody to come on the show tonight. Mm-hmm. And, I posted in 60 Facebook groups, right? Because why not? Go big or go home. And one of the first people that responded was Ben. And he was like, hey, I might be able to do it. And I'm like, well, that's pretty great. So I hadn't even really looked at what Ben had yet. And I said, hey, if you could send some links my way. And then he did. And I'm like, holy shit. He's 40 minutes away.
Yeah.
Which is rare for us. It's really rare. We get a lot of Canucks on the show for some reason. We get a lot of Canadians.
Not that that's a bad thing.
There was such a scene in Canada for horror films. But apparently, besides the fact, I will break down the fourth wall. We did produce a Canadian horror film, so obviously we do have a little bit of an audience there.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of Canadian horror lovers.
And none of it's on hockey. That's weird.
Well, so Ben has produced some shorts, which we've watched and we've really enjoyed. Yeah. And he's in the midst of producing a feature, and he has his own production company. He's got a lot of shit going on.
All right.
If he didn't sound nice, I'd already be like, fuck this guy. Sometimes I like living vicariously through people, and then I'm like, fuck these people.
Fuck them.
I want to live vicariously through myself, which I know makes absolutely no sense at all, but at some point in time I'm going to make it happen. So welcome to the show, Ben. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you for having me, Ash. I really appreciate it. It's great to be on.
Now, we also have to talk about where you're currently from, because it's relatively close to us.
Yeah, I'm actually born and raised in Decatur, Illinois, right smack in the middle of Illinois. So I am surrounded by cornfields and soybeans as far as the eye can see. So
and it's the Midwest, so right now, crystal meth and STDs.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Definitely plenty to inspire you, either through the meth heads or the boredom of watching the corn grow. There's plenty to get your creativity flowing. So yeah, it works good.
When did things change so much for the heartland?
That's a good question. I don't know. It seems like the Midwest. I think a lot of it has to do with social media. People are more desensitized these days than they used to be, which actually for us in the horror biz makes things a little bit difficult. We have to step our game up every year, it seems, and get weirder and weirder as we go. To continue to surprise people because of how crazy things are getting.
And the Midwest is basically Illinois is becoming the Florida of the Midwest.
Oh, a little bit, yeah. And I think maybe it's always been that way. We're just now finding it out because we see it. We see more of it.
Well, that's
thanks to Facebook and Instagram. And
that's an interesting point you raised. So we always have to do this because, we're very self-conscious about our age. So when we have people in their 20s on the show, we're like, oh, Jesus Christ. Look at you with your life ahead of you and not behind you. So how old are you, Ben?
I am of the older generation. I'm actually 45, so I've been around the block a few times.
Thank God. I'm turning 44 in December.
Hey, we're right there
42.
with each other.
Now we can tell all the kids to get off our collective lawns.
That's right.
That's right.
Fuckers. I'm sick of them. I'm sick of them already. So being in our 40s, now this is something that we talk about a lot because, quite frankly, it's this phenomena that we can't really get away from. And I think that once you sort of enter this new epoch in life, it becomes much more visible, much more apparent, is that we're probably the last generation that's going to understand that social media transition.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we're one of the last generations that have been around that have been without social media. I remember the commercials on TV when AOL first came out. That's really dating myself by mentioning that kind of that kind of thing. But I remember when the internet first became alive, so to speak, and how innovative it was, and we all thought it was going to change the world. And now most of what we do is just sit around watching porn, and
Yeah.
that's about the extent of it. So, I don't know what the goal for the internet was, but leave it to us Americans to find a way to ruin it.
We do seem a little misguided, admittedly.
Yeah.
It's the world at our fingertips, and we go right to Pornhub.
Yeah, which again is still the world at our fingertips. Oh,
Yeah.
zing! That's a zinger. So, now, were you always a fan of horror films and film in general, Ben?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as little as I can remember, my whole family are big horror buffs and movie buffs, and I remember being, 3, 4 years old and watching the creature features on the weekends with my mom and my sister, and just being horrified and excited and scared and happy all at the same time. A lot of time, the old school horror movies just have such a fond memory for me. Some of the old black and whites, and all the way up into modern day. I mean, it's just a genre that I've grown up with, and I introduced it to my kids, and so on and so forth. It's just, yeah, it's been a huge part of my life.
So we're gonna get sentimental tonight, Ben.
Maybe.
Yeah, I've already decided. Like before I got on here, I'm like, I'm gonna
right.
get sentimental tonight.
We are.
Yeah, probably because I'm drinking. Those two things seem to go hand in hand. So it's interesting that you would talk about this sort of journey, because I think a lot of us have had, at least of this generation, have had that same journey. This like staying up late for the midnight movies, watching the creature features. And there was ceremony to this. There was ritual to this. Something that we don't necessarily have anymore with things being as accessible as they are. And I want to be able to sort of give that experience to my kids, and it's very difficult because they understand how available everything is. They've got a firm grasp on the accessibility of all kinds of media. So we try to plan like a movie night, and I'm like, come on, we need to be in front of we have a projector, like in front of the projector at 8, because that's when the movie starts, and they're looking at me like, you liar. The movie starts whenever we start it.
Yeah.
That's just the way this works now. It's like they've been to the theater with me, but there's still this idea where it's like we start it and that's when it starts. And our generation, again, it harkens back to this idea of ritual and ceremony, because there was preparation. The movies didn't start with the movie starting. There was popcorn. There was this idea of staying up late. Now, do you think the experience is maybe diluted, a little bit watered down, because we're generations removed from it now?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I do in some regards think that that's the case. There was a big buildup for that. You had to be in front of your TV or at the movie theater on a certain date at a certain time in order to get to that thing that you wanted to watch. And the buildup was almost as nice as the actual viewing. Even if the film that you were watching wasn't even really that good, you still left satisfied. You were still done. You were satisfied at the end of it, because that buildup was part of the enjoyment. And now, just clicking a button and you can watch a film. It makes it a lot easier to not build that nostalgia. I think I even find myself getting caught up into that trap of not building nostalgia and maybe having to watch a film 2 or 3 times before it really sinks in. It's almost like you gorge. We call it binge watching. It's almost like you're gorging yourself on these films, and so because you're eating them with your eyes and your ears so fast, you're not really digesting them. And so I think a lot of people are only seeing the surface of what's on a lot of these films that are out there today, and they're not really digging into the layers of the film. The music score, the presence, the lighting, all of those things that really make some of these films haunting and very frightening. And we miss out on a lot of that now because we eat these films so fast to get to the next one that we miss a lot of that subtlety. And so I think it's good that you can get to a lot of this stuff faster than you used to be able to in some regards, but in most regards I think it's really bad. The only time that I really think that it's good is back in the 70s and 80s, when I was just watching as many horror films as I could, and I still do, by the way. But back then, it wasn't as immediate, but also it wasn't as widespread. You couldn't get to a lot of horror films. I remember hearing it was almost like urban legends things, like back in the and I'll date myself here by throwing films like this out, but like films like Faces of Death, which were more grotesque maybe than horror. But you hear these urban legends kind of about these films, but getting your hands on them back then was so difficult. The internet didn't exist. So if you didn't have a friend of a friend of a friend that had a copy of it or some kind of access to it, you missed out on a lot of that stuff. And so for some of these films, it was an even longer build up, because it may take you weeks or months before you got your hands on a copy to see it. And we've lost that at this point. So it's sad in a way, but in another way, it's enjoyable, because a lot of those films that you really want to see very badly, you can get to pretty quickly, unlike it was when we were kids.
Now, did you grow up in the Midwest?
I did, yeah. I've lived in the Midwest pretty much my entire life. So yeah, I grew up here. So films like Jaws weren't particularly frightening to me. I can appreciate the film, the film, of course, and there are scary moments. But when you live in a landlocked Corn Belt, sharks don't scare you quite as much. But books and films like Children of the Corn and Friday the 13th, those were the kinds of films that would keep me up at night when I was a kid, because that was a lot more tied into my surroundings than maybe some other films.
Well, and I love that we're able to sort of share some of these memories tonight, because growing up as a kid, I grew up in a very rural town. So, and even speaking of the Midwest, people don't understand what rural really means. And it's always been fun to me whenever we watch a film that deals with events happening in a small town, and then I see that their population's 52,000.
Yeah.
And it's like, wait a second, this wasn't written by a Hollywood professional, was it?
Yeah.
Because this idea of a small town to them is a town in the middle of nowhere that still has 50,000 people.
Yeah.
And I grew up in a town that had 480. So when you look at rural, like, we were really just a gas station away from being nothing, from just being rubble. The town just sort of collapsing in on itself. But when you're in a smaller town in the Midwest, when you're sort of detached, especially pre-internet, man, there were some things that were so fascinating because they were scarce and rare, and it was very difficult to find. And then there were also times when, man, the world was a lonely fucking place for a kid who had interests that were a little bit avant-garde, for kids looking for something off the beaten path. And I mean, I remember, as a kid, it was like, there's nobody. There's nobody. I'm an island. There's nobody out there. Yeah. And I don't think that this generation understands, first of all, how precious of a thing it is to be able to hop on your phone or your computer and almost instantly find someone that has your interests. That was such a rare thing to do, being, you're talking about this landlocked area, being at a place that wasn't this coast or that coast. It was just sort of in the middle, and we never really got the benefit of this creative Gulf Stream. It just never really happened. So we were all sort of like really, really waiting. Like we were waiting for things to converge. And then you'd hear about like a horror convention, and in your brain you're like, that's our Mecca. Yeah. That's our Devil's Tower. We've got to go there because that's the only place I'll be understood. So now, interestingly to me, I think that being the generation that we're from and having gone through that transition, like, horror has a place in my heart that, I'll be honest, I don't know if future generations can really capture.
I would agree with that. I think growing up in rural areas, because I did too. The town that I spent my first several years of life in was about the same size as what you were talking. Maybe 500-600 people. And the interesting thing is watching the creature features and stuff, you would become inspired, and it would make you want to be creative. But like you said, the connection with people was so rare that you had to find ways to be creative, and boredom breeds creativity. A lot of people complain about being bored these days because they don't have that social media outlet. Like if their Wi-Fi goes down or something like that, or their phone dies, they're instantly bored. But I think that helps you. Boredom breeds creativity, and I think that's why we've had so many really, really good horror films from areas that are away from the coasts, because there's less, or away from metropolitan areas, because when you grow up in the sticks, there's nothing else to do except try to find, when you're a kid, play games, create games, create your own stories, and create your own legends, and create your own ghost stories around campfires, all of that stuff. And I'm not saying that other people aren't creative in some of the metropolitan areas. I don't mean it like that, but there's a lot more to do in those areas, and so I think there's a give and take there. I think they also benefit. People who grow up in big cities benefit from having that, like you said, that camaraderie with other people that have similar interests. So there's a lot more people to bounce ideas off of. And so I guess in that sense, there's probably still some creativity there too, but I don't have that experience, so I can't really speak to it. The only experience I have is sitting around by myself, wishing desperately that I could figure out a way to create something that was horrific, that would scare people, and not having anybody to share that vision with until I got older.
It's an interesting feeling. It really is. I had lived in Illinois largely, aside from some jaunts here and there that were still in the Midwest, till I was in my 20s. And from there, I moved to New York, was there for about 12 years. And it was interesting because we talk about this camaraderie. And when I moved out to the East Coast, I didn't realize the vast network and support system that was there. Like I didn't realize that you would find another creative person if you just threw a stick. You were gonna hit somebody.
Wow. Yeah.
It's just a numbers game. It's entirely a numbers game. So it was interesting when I moved back, because I had tried to get some things started when I moved back, and had greater difficulty than I thought, because I hadn't been here in 12 years. I thought that the world had moved with me. And then I came back, and I'm like, well, I really can't get 30 people together to watch a horror movie with me. It's just not happening tonight. And I think that speaks to this idea again, that the intensity that we have, especially in this part of the country and sort of our generation, maybe does burn a little bit brighter, because we've had to constantly stoke that fire and fan that flame on our own.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. And what's interesting too is I although I've been a fan of film my entire life, huge fan of horror films, and well, I mean all films really. I didn't get into filmmaking actually until much later in life. Actually, I've only been a filmmaker for the last few years. Before that, I was a novel writer, a musician. I mean, I did all kinds of different things to be creative and to tell a story. And I guess that's what I would probably consider myself to be, more than a filmmaker or a musician or the owner of a production company, or co-owner of a production company, I should say. I do have a business partner. But I would probably consider myself to be a storyteller more than anything. And like we were talking about, I think that was just bred out of boredom. When I grew up, we had 3 channels on TV, and that was pretty much it. We lived in the sticks, so there was no cable. There were very few friends to play with, so you had to come up with your own things to do to try to entertain yourself. And so most of the time I ended up putting pen to paper and trying to write out stories and entertain myself through stories, and that just eventually led into all these other avenues of creativity through my life. But yeah, I ended up, it never dawned on me when I was younger, hey, I could make a film out of this. I just knew that I loved to tell a story, and the medium that I had available to me at the time was a pen and paper, and so that's what I used. And I didn't think about it being put on a film until much later.
So when did the genesis of that really happen for you? And obviously we always sort of dream of being filmmakers at one point, especially for people that love film as much as we do. There's always this idea of, wow, I would love to make that. I would love to be a part of that. But strangely enough, there always seems to be this big gulf of experience that keeps us from doing it. So when did it finally click for you that, hey, I'm going to make movies?
Surprisingly enough, less than 5 years ago. I know that sounds crazy,
No, not at all.
but it's the truth. I, like I said, I was a writer at a very young age. I was writing stories and short or novellas through grade school and junior high and up through high school. And then I ended up, I'm a huge fan of music too. So I ended up becoming a musician, and I played music locally for 25 years, probably something like that. And that became all consuming for the most part, just playing music and using that as a creativity and as a method of storytelling. Um, but it wasn't until I started getting out of the music industry, and I needed to find something to continue to be creative. And we had done a couple music videos in my last band, and the storytelling behind the video, it just clicked. And for whatever reason, it just took almost 40 years for that to click for me, for it to click and say, wait a minute, why didn't I ever think of doing this? Why didn't I ever think of actually making films? Why am I not doing this? And the light bulb started burning, and I went out and I just started buying gear. And I thought, you know what? I don't care if I'm too old. I don't care if I've never done this before. I don't care if I don't have a college degree in it. I'll figure it out. And in that instance, the internet helped me quite a bit. Udemy courses, YouTube
Yeah.
videos, all of that stuff. I mean, so everything that I've done with video, for the most part, self-taught. It's things that it's trial and error, trying to figure out things on my own, watching YouTube videos. And there is a pretty decent network around here. It's a small network, but there's a lot of people around here that are very helpful. And I've worked with quite a few really, really talented filmmakers in Central Illinois and a little bit stretched out from Central Illinois, and they've been a huge help to me. And it's been kind of interesting, the music scene, at least the music scene that I know of. Unfortunately, it's real cliquey. It's class based. You're either in one clique or you're in another clique. There's a lot of battles in that. There's a lot of drama in the music scene. And so when I stepped into the film scene, I kind of expected the same thing. So I was bracing myself for this fight of trying to wedge my way into this scene, or this community, so to speak. And I can't tell you how surprised I was that myself and my business partner Adam, we were really welcomed with open arms. And it was a huge shock to me that people were so willing and ready to assist me and help teach me how to do this new passion. And I just wasn't really expecting that at all. And so there's a lot of people over the last 5 years that have helped me quite a bit, that I would not be nearly as far along as I am if it wasn't for them.
And it is interesting because you would expect that there'd be some kind of resistance. People who have taken their whole lives to get where they are, you'd expect that there might be a little bit of resistance here. They might not necessarily welcome me into the fold, but for some reason, filmmaking, and especially at the independent filmmaking level, anyways, it's a very welcoming community, surprisingly.
It is, yeah, and I was really surprised at that. Like I said, there's a lot of class battles and clique battles in the music scene, and of course that's unfortunate. And it's not all the. And I'm not saying there are bad musicians, good musicians, or anything like that. Everybody's pretty much the same. Everybody has the same goal, but for whatever reason, there's just a lot of friction in that particular creative field in the Midwest, at least. And I really expected that in the film industry, and I did not get that at all. And like I said, I was really surprised. Now, I mean, granted, we've ran in a time or two. We've ran into some folks that have been, maybe a little more difficult to work with than others, but it's been so few and far between that it's really not even, worth mentioning, to be honest with you. Most everybody we work with has been professional, open, communicative, helpful. It's just kind of blown me away that the industry is so welcoming. And because of that, we work with a lot of people who don't have a lot of experience in the industry, and we try to do our best, with the limited amount that we've learned over the last few years. We do our best to try to pass that information down to maybe some other people who are starting out, and try to be open with our knowledge and information, the same as what was given to us.
Now let's talk a little bit about what you've had on your plate. So we saw that 2 links specifically that you gave us. You've got like a 40-minute short film on your roster already, correct?
Yes, yeah, we do have a film called Story of the Year. It's not a straight up horror film. It's more of a thriller. Uh, it's basically it's just about a hostage situation that goes very, very wrong. Which, I mean, hostage situation's already wrong anyway. But
Right.
yeah, it's basically just a hostage situation that goes really wrong. So it's more of a thriller, and it's based on the mass media of today and how twisted and perverse they are, and how they will drive people to do things that they normally wouldn't do, to get the story out, to get the headline out. And there's a lot of tension in the film, or at least I hope that was our intention. At least was to have a lot of tension, and yeah. So I mean, we had a lot of fun. Most of the creative things that we work with are scripts that I write. We are open to working with other script writers, of course, but most of what we've worked with so far have all been scripts that I've written. But luckily for me, we've gotten really lucky with a lot of the cast and the crew that we've worked with. The Story of the Year, which is the short film that you're talking about, we work with some really, really excellent cast and crew. We work with some folks that have a lot of experience. You know, Steve Christopher was one of the actors. Wes Melton, Brett Blakely, which he's a little bit new to the scene. He played a part in it. Catherine Bokenkamp played a part in it. Andrew Southoff, which actually is, surprisingly enough, is our staff photographer, actually played a role in the film too. And then a young lady, Josie Matthews, made her film debut in it too. And then my daughter actually played a part in it as well. And we had a couple other people that played some flashback scenes in it. So yeah, we got to work with some pretty good cast members. And with it, that was our first foray into something longer than like 10 minutes. So it was very, very daunting, very nerve-wracking, and luckily for us, we worked with some cast members and some crew members that were very patient with us while we tried to fumble our way through this and end up with something that was passable. And luckily for us, we worked with some good people that made it a lot easier. You know, and of course, you know, what's a film without a good sound mix? And Eric Watkins, another friend of mine who owns a studio here in Decatur, put the film score together for that and did an absolutely fantastic job. Me, of course, I'm an audio engineer, and then I'm also a musician. So, and I've done that for 15 plus years. And so music, to me, I understand its importance with film. If you don't have a good film score, if you don't have good audio, it's going to make the film a lot less interesting to most moviegoers, and it's sometimes it's subconscious. The audio really sets the tone and sets the mood in a lot of cases. It's just as important, if not more important, than lighting, if you ask me. And so having that really terrific film score on that really made a huge difference. And Eric Watkins was kind enough to work with us on that, and he came out with a really nice score.
You know, it's interesting you should say that, because I was reading an article, strangely enough, on piracy. And it was a different kind of article on piracy. Usually it's just damning it, and I understand that as well. But it was really looking at people who are sort of involved in piracy rings for films. And one thing they asked was, they said, well, what really is your criteria to distribute a pirated movie? And strangely enough, almost unanimously, it was, the sound can't be crap.
Yeah.
Strangely enough, people are more prone to watch pirated films even if the video quality is subpar, as opposed to if they have problems hearing it.
Yes, there's been many filmmakers that say that audio is about 70% of a film. If the audio's bad, it pulls you out of the story. The effects can be great, the cinematography can be great. I'm a firm believer that if you have poor audio, it's going to pull people out of the film faster than anything else.
And also, for people who are going to be listening to this in just a few short days, apparently the studio or my Mac is haunted. Because as a call came in, suddenly YouTube launched itself.
Oh.
In a video that I would never watch. On top of that. So, thanks, Spectres. Thank you so much for your participation tonight.
Just letting you know they're there.
Yeah, and in abundance.
Yes.
Yeah. Just loud as hell. In fact, now that I'm thinking about it, I should just go ahead and turn down the volume on the external speakers. I think that would be a great idea. Probably should have done that before we actually started the recording. Now, I I find that people who again sort of come into filmmaking a little bit later, it's interesting, Ben. We are brothers from another mother. I'm just gonna say that. Our kinship
Awesome.
runs deep already, Ben. I just started filmmaking probably about a year and a half ago. And again, was the thing where I've felt it all my life, didn't understand why I hadn't done it till then. But I think people who do it a little bit later in life, strangely enough, we've got this huge sort of mythology behind us about what film means.
Yeah.
And how maybe we can do it incorrectly, and how we try to shy away from doing it. So it seems incorrectly sounds very harsh and severe because we're looking at an artistic medium, but still, I've seen film that I thought to myself, that's done incorrectly. So
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and use the term for whatever it's worth. But we seem to have this backlogged appreciation for making something that we love, not just making something where, and I've seen this before, people who make film without an appreciation of where is my camera, why am I lighting. There is sort of this ABC method storytelling where it's just, this is the shot, so I got to get the shot. This is what I want to convey in the story, so just got to get past it, and then we can move on to the next thing so that eventually we're reaching the end. And it seems like with a lot of young filmmakers, it's an endurance test. We just got to get this made. And I understand the compulsion behind that. But at the same time, I'm looking at, how do I make this what I want it to be? How do I actually create something that, for starters, I can look at something that I've made and understand that's dog shit. I have created dog shit. I have mastered the recipe for dog shit.
I have as well, yes.
And then I have those moments where I take a step back and I'm like, I almost can't believe I did that. And even though I have confidence, I'm still like, I can't believe I actually pulled that off. Because that is most certainly not dog shit.
Yeah. I have yet to make any film, short or otherwise, where I felt like it in its entirety was not dog shit at one point or another. I'll have certain angles or certain lighting or certain lines, and I'm like, okay, that was nice. That's exactly what I was hoping it would be. But they are very much surrounded by several other scenes or shots or lighting where I just pick it apart. Of course, we're all always our own worst critics, myself included, and so I'm never satisfied with the final result on anything, and I'm okay with that. I guess it's a little disappointing, I think, sometimes to never be satisfied, but I think I don't know very many creative people who are satisfied, and I think there's some magic to that. Because the second you become satisfied, that's when you stop learning and then you stop striving to get better. And I think that as long as there's just a little bit of doubt on your ability, you're going to keep striving to achieve that perfection. And it's unattainable, really, in my opinion. You're never going to be able to achieve your own perfection.
Right.
But there's some fun in that as well, trying to achieve it. I kind of consider myself a little bit of a rule breaker when it comes to filmmaking. Of course, I'm a novice at this. I've been doing it less than 5 years, so I'd be a liar if I said I was experienced at all. But I have studied and I've learned all these certain rules about lighting and camera position and all this stuff. And I try to adhere to that as best as I can. I really do. But I find that there are times where I will purposefully break those rules if I think it serves what I'm trying to say in a certain fashion. And I think that's okay. One of my favorite films of all time is actually considered being the number one film, which is Citizen Kane. Not a horror movie, but and I look at that and I look at what Orson Welles did with that film and all the rules that he broke with camera angles and lighting and set design and all these things that he did that prior to him had really not been done before. And I kind of think to myself, I wonder what those studio executives had to think about that. I wonder what the meetings were like. How many times did they tell him, you can't do it that way, you have to do it this way and that way? And he said, damn you, I'm going to do it my own way. It's my film. And he did it. And now it's considered to be one of the best films of all time. And no, I'm not comparing myself to Orson Welles. Those are way too big of shoes for me to fill. So I don't mean it in that fashion. But I do have an appreciation. I have an appreciation for the rules, but I also have an appreciation for the desire to break them when I feel it necessary.
Now,
And
when we had first started talking, you had mentioned that you're currently involved in a feature, correct?
yes.
So let's talk about that for a moment. What exactly are you doing as far as this feature is concerned?
Okay. Yeah. So, what I've written a script, and
I said that so pointedly. It was almost like
well, yeah,
so the Inquisition. It's like
yeah.
this
Well, I've
feature, Ben. This feature that you
yeah, I
talk
know
about.
it's
While doing air
daunting.
quotes. This feature that you talk about.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It's yeah, it's very daunting. Let me tell you, this will be the first full-length film that we've tried to achieve. It's not a horror film, surprisingly enough, although it does have some pretty horrific scenes in it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's actually going to be a drama, and it's the premise of it. The script's done, so we're in pre-production. We've hired a producer. Um, and we're in the process of creating our business plan and all of the boring stuff that leads up to the actual fun stuff, which is actually making the film, is where we're at right now. We have our first planning meeting with our producer here in a couple weeks, and we're going to start putting our business plan to use and start doing the investor search and all of that stuff and get funding for it. But the premise of the film is basically just it's about twin brother and sister who grew up in like the absolute worst possible way. There was a lot of addiction in their life. There was abuse, some pretty severe abuse in their lives when they were growing up, and they were trying to find. And both of them navigated into adulthood on going down two different paths. One of them became a drug addict, and the other one became, I don't want to say a well-adjusted adult, but more well-adjusted than the other one. And the whole film is basically one of the twins, the more well-adjusted one, going and rescuing the drug-addicted twin from a drug house and getting him cleaned up and ready to go to their mother's funeral, who had just died a few days prior to that. And this whole process of her getting her twin brother cleaned up, fed, dressed, and stable enough to go to their mother's funeral. And while all this is happening, flashing back to their childhood and all these absolutely horrible things that happened to them that led them down these different paths. So it's way out of left field for me. So it's going to be a pretty big challenge.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually the first thing I've ever written in my entire life that's not horror based.
Right.
So it's going to be a challenge, but it's one that I'm welcoming because it's going to be a little bit different.
Well, in indie filmmaking in itself, in essence, is challenging. I mean, we don't have this luxury, first of all, of expansive budgets.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, a lot of what we rely on is the kindness and charity of strangers to be able to make some of these things actually happen for us. So what has been some of your challenges and some of your obstacles as far as just actually getting product made?
The challenges have been time and lack of knowledge. And I should say, I mean, most of the time, like I said, the community's really welcomed us with open arms for the most part. We've had a lot of really good help from some pretty talented individuals in the area. So as far as that goes, we haven't had, I don't want to say we haven't had challenges. We've had actors and actresses, do the no call, no show stuff on a set when everybody's standing around waiting for them. We've had crew members not show up. We've had your run of the mill kind of problems with that. Locations cancel last minute, and those are all issues. But I mean, that's to be expected. I think the biggest problem that we've had is probably our own lack of knowledge. I don't want to speak too much for my business partner, Adam, but he'd probably agree. But my biggest concern is just the lack of knowledge and trying to figure out a way to navigate it and learn at the same time. And that's been tough. And the business side of it is kind of tough too, but it's necessary. So, a lot of people, I think, when they first start out filmmaking, they want to write the script and they want to jump right in and just immediately start filming. But there's all of this work that goes into the background that's not fun. I don't know. I mean, maybe there's somebody out there that really likes to put together business plans and analyze demographics for the film that you're making, but I'm not one of them. I'd rather write a script and film it. That's what I like to do. So, but because we're a small production company, we have to wear a lot of hats. I mean, for example, on Story of the Year, probably the biggest struggle we had on that set was Adam and I trying to take on too many things. We made a big mistake in not bringing in enough crew members. So I was the or the DP. I was also the director. We did bring in somebody for audio, but I played all of those roles: director, DP. I had a pretty strong hand in the audio. Adam was also DP. He was set design. He was lighting. So we just tried to do too many things. And so what happened is no one thing got 100% of our concentration. Instead, all things only got about 50% of our concentration. And because of that, there are certain areas that I think that short film suffered. And it's through no fault of the crew, through no fault of the cast. They were absolutely fantastic. Anything in that film where if there's a place that lacks, it's just because the direction faltered, or the DP, myself, faltered, or the lighting wasn't exactly right. So I think that's probably been our biggest challenge, is trying to learn as we go.
Well, you suffer from the same plights as being a small business owner.
Yeah.
It's like there's stuff that you want to do that ultimately is the reason that you started doing it. It could be telling a story, or a small business owner might be landscaping. You've got this passion, but being able and then sort of being able to build a business around it, unfortunately, has the caveat of I'm having to take care of all these administrative jobs.
Yeah.
I'm having to manage it as well as create it. And that's a difficult thing to do, especially for creative personalities. But it's a difficult thing to do because you just want to get right to the meat. I want to get to the storytelling. I want to get to the filmmaking.
Yeah, and you can't. You have to. Well, you can. I mean, I know filmmakers today that run out and they write a script and they film it in the same day. And quite frankly, some of them are pretty brilliant, and it makes me horribly jealous that they can do it and make it look like it's so easy.
Right.
But I've also seen a lot of them that they get in too big of a hurry, and they end up with something that could have been better had they taken more time with it. And that's the thing that's the most difficult, I think, about filmmaking, is having the patience to do it to do it slowly, to make sure that you're getting it right. The worst words that you can say in the film industry, and coincidentally, it's also the worst things that you can say in the music industry too. When you're a songwriter, is ever getting at the end of a take, or the end of writing a song, or the end of recording a song, or the end of a scene in a script that you've written, is looking at it, reading it back, being slightly disappointed, but then shrugging your shoulders and using that one line that's just horrible and saying, "Yeah, that's good enough."
Yeah.
If you say it's good enough, it's not good enough.
Now,
it needs to be perfect, and you have to have patience for that. You have to capture it to the best of your ability. And I think I see a lot of people who do that. They capture something and they say, well, this is wrong, that's wrong, but you know what? It's good enough. We'll just roll with it. And that's the kiss of death.
So, since you're currently involved in production on the film, what are your expectations for completion and then release?
Our plan is to continue throughout 2019 to do all the pre-production. We're going to start casting calls probably in August. Our plan is to film one of the scenes from the film in late August or early September. May not be the same cast that we end up selecting for the final film, but we're going to get something put together and edited so we can use it for our investment pitch. And then we're going to basically pitch it throughout the fall and into the winter. And our plan is to actually begin filming in the spring of 2020. Now, we also edit our films. We do some of the film scoring, even though we have people in the music industry that will help us score films, hopefully for this one as well. But our plan is to film it. It's going to probably take we're expecting a 10-day shoot. So we're going to try to get it done all at once, just over a 2-week period. Hopefully, if things go well, that's what will happen. And then maybe with some reshoots, maybe a month later if we need them. And then the plan is to spend the entire summer next year editing, film scoring, all of that stuff. So our plan is to either release it in late 2020 or very early 2021.
Now, for people who maybe aren't familiar with the work who'll be listening to this, where can they go to find out more about what you do, find out more about your production company, and the name of your production company, by the way? How can they find out more about you?
Oh, sure, yeah. Well, the name of our production company is Dark Soul Studios. And you can find us, probably the easiest place to find us would be on Facebook. You can just search, facebook.com/Dark Soul Studios. We're also on YouTube, so you can look us up on YouTube. We have a website, just darksoulstudios.com. You'll find most of our videos. I mean, Facebook's probably our main social media platform. We do have a Twitter account, but honestly, I'm too we do it all ourselves, and I'm too busy to try to keep track of all of the social media. So the Twitter account probably doesn't get as much attention as it should. Most of our stuff's done through Facebook still. So that's probably the best way. All of our casting calls, all of our crew calls, all of that stuff is always announced on Facebook. We love to work with new and upcoming crew members and cast members. So I always encourage people, even if you don't have any experience at all, there's no harm in reaching out and trying. You never know. You may find that you have a skill or a passion for something, and it's never too late. And that's the biggest thing that I like to tell people. I hear people all the time our age say, "Oh, I really wish I would have done that when I was younger." And I always tell them, "Well, why don't you start now?" And I always hear the excuses. Well, I have a day job, I have kids, I have a wife, I have this, I have that, and I'm here to tell you you can do it. I think a lot of that, I don't want to say it's excuses, because I don't mean it's excuses. Those other things, children, wives, jobs, those are all very important for your stability and your livelihood. I understand all that, but nobody ever lays on their deathbed and wishes they would have worked more. And that's kind of the way that I live my life. So if there's ever anything I want to do, I at least try. I fail way more than I succeed, but I always try. And it's never too late to try. I don't care if you're 60. If you want to make a film, make a film. We have YouTube. You learn it. Take some classes, learn it, and make it. You may be the only one that likes it. You may be the only one that appreciates it, but at least you can say you did it.
Do you have a few moments off the air for us, Ben?
Yeah.
Well, we want to thank you so much for being on with us tonight.
Okay.
Again, for anyone who's going to be listening, definitely take a look for Dark Soul Studios. Take a look at what Ben has done online. The short film we really enjoyed. Again, it's a huge endeavor to make a 40-minute short film, which he has done, and then the fact that he's currently involved in a feature. So everything that we've seen coming from you, Ben, is great work, and we're expecting great work in the future. So again, thank you so much for being with us tonight, so that we can talk about what you've got on your plate, what's in store for your future. And again, people who are listening, definitely take a look for Ben and Dark Soul Studios.
Oh, thank you very much. I can't thank you guys enough for having me on. It was a real pleasure, and I'm looking forward to hearing more in the future.
Thank you so much.